So, yeah.
I didn't know until a few days before, until Frank Slaughter lost it. But he spoke strong at the end of the service.
You did the
Service
eulogy?
at the end of the service,
He
right?
did the eulogy? Oh, you okay.
He spoke.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started in about 10 minutes with, 10 seconds. I'm so sorry, not that long. In about 10, 20 seconds. Give everyone the opportunity, if you would just take your communication devices, if cell phones particularly, and if you can just place those on vibrate, we would appreciate it. And just while you're doing that, we'd just like to welcome everyone, and we appreciate you coming out to do the presentation. So with that, okay. Alrighty. So with that, we're going to call the Town of Mangonia Park Local Planning Agency meeting of September 21st, 2021 into session. A roll call, please. Here.
Vice Mayor Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Green.
Here.
Councilmember McConnell.
Here.
And Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Thank you so much. Of course, this is a public hearing, so I'm going to go to staff if they'd like to just do a presentation, or if you have anything prior to that. If not, well, the applicant is present. And if you would, just state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. For staff, this is Denise Malone with NZ Consultants. I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to the item before you. It is an amendment to the comprehensive plan, specifically the future land use element of policy 1.1.2. It is a text amendment that has been proposed by the applicant, who will give a presentation here shortly, and it is to increase the floor area ratio or the intensity of self-storage facilities in the commercial future land use from a 0.5 FAR up to a maximum of 1.5 FAR. And that would be for those locations that would meet the eligible criteria of being a minimum of 1.3 acres, and also fronting either 45th Street or Australian Avenue. So again, it's a text amendment, privately initiated, proposed by the applicant, who we'd like to introduce now and let them provide a presentation regarding their proposal.
Yes, and we'll just ask if you just state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. Good evening. My name is Josh Nichols, Wishman-Nichols, and we're the applicant, or the agent for the applicant. And with me tonight, we have Historic Rental of America representatives with us. So for any specific questions about their operation, be happy to have them come up and answer anything. But as we get started, so this is, you saw this project previously. We did a workshop. We kind of went through some of our proposed, I guess, development parameters. We're very pleased to present to you that we are down from, before it was going to be not only the text amendment for the FAR, but we were going for our 4th story. So that has been eliminated. So now we're down to the 3 stories. So very similar to what was previously approved on this project, and we'll talk about some of those similarities. So if we could go to the next slide. So this is just a quick outline showing the location of the property. So it's basically across the street here at South Place and 45th Street. And again, as you may know of these properties, they're very shallow in depth. So it's very difficult to develop these parcels. Also, the traffic along 45th, as you probably well know, is challenging. So it's nice to be able to present a use for this property that has a very low, intense traffic generation rate. So the formal request you have before us is as Ms. Malone mentioned, is a comprehensive plan text amendment for future land use, and this is to allow 1.5 FAR. And the specific thing here, I think, to mention is that it's only for self-service storage, right? So you couldn't get this text amendment and then say, well, I'm going to change and I'm going to do office building here at 1.5. That is not the case. So this is specific to self-service storage, and it's only to those parcels that are 1.3 acres in size and that front on 45th Street in Australia. So a very limited location and criteria for this type of development to occur. And we'll we'll talk about some of the analysis that we did in a minute. So the subject site is approximately 1.81 acres. And as you may recall, the Meritage development to the north of this required some dedication of land. So that's, and I'll talk about that as well when we talk about FARs. But again, zoning is commercial limited, and the future land use is commercial. Next slide. So again, this is specifically what is in the comp plan now. So it talks about in commercial, you've got that maximum density and intensity of 50% and 3 stories. So what we're proposing is note number 1, which is specific to the self-storage that takes us up to the 1.5 FAR, and it's only for those parcels that I mentioned with the 1.3 acres minimum and that front on 45th and Australia. So that would be increased there. And just going to the our justification for the text amendment. So, you know, the town's comp plan and zoning doesn't contemplate the uniqueness of what self-storage is. So self-storage, you know, while they go up and out for the most part, they're very low intensity in terms of your public facilities. You don't have a lot of police issues. You don't have the services for water, sewer. You typically only have 1 restroom. And then the most important, though, for this locale is the traffic. There's just very, very minimal traffic. So that is really good specifically to this location. Again, the addition of proposed self-storage note will allow the future land use policy to be more specific in terms of FARs for these facilities. One of the things that I think is interesting too is we did a quick study of some of the other municipalities and jurisdictions and what their FARs are for self-service storage. So as you'll see in the city of West Palm Beach, they have up to a 1.5 FAR for the CE, which is commercial east. So they adopted that a few years back, and a lot of the properties along Dixie Highway and some of those properties. So basically everything east of 95 is eligible for the CE designation, and you can go up to 1.5 FAR. And that's not just for self-storage, that's across the board 1.5. City of Riviera Beach had recently adopted some language specific to self-service storage at 1.4 FAR. And then unincorporated Palm Beach County actually has a URA overlay, which is an urban redevelopment agency area, and they have unlimited. So as long as it's a form-based, so as long as you can meet the setbacks, the parking, your traffic, you build this, and the height, sorry, but basically the sky's the limit. So there's no intensity limitation. So just, again, these are very localized, other consistent codes and comp plans. So again, just going into the current FAR on this specific property would allow, at the 0.5, would allow for about 40,000 square feet. This would not suffice for what the market demands in terms of a financially feasible project for self-storage. So what the 1.5 would allow is up to 118,000 square feet. We're roughly at about 100,000 square feet on our proposal, which you'll see. And again, due to the lot configuration, the curvature of 45th, and where our driveways need to be, it's a very constrained lot, and I think this use really fits it well. And again, which we mentioned last time at the workshop, but there is a minimal leasable area, and so this FAR that we're proposing it gets us to that point where it starts to make sense. As I mentioned, we had to do some level of service analysis, and I won't go into all the details here. What I really think is important in the level of service analysis, because what we did is we took, basically when we were trying to identify, okay, if it's going to apply to all those sites that are 1.3 acres that front on Australian and 45th, we need to know how, if we were to implement this comp plan change, what would it do for those properties, right? So there was only 7 sites, which I'll show you, but what I think is interesting is there was an average of an 88% decrease in traffic on those properties. Because right now those properties typically are commercial, right? So they're going to be able to support office or medical or other retail. But if this was enacted, if they were to do self-service storage, it would be a decrease of about 88% overall for those parcels. Going to the next slide, and this just shows the 7 specific parcels that were analyzed that would meet the criteria to be able to enact this comp plan text change. So again, most of them, well, all of them, either front on 45th or Australia. So you can see those ones that are over 1.3 acres. Going to, and again, we know we have a site plan process that will come after this. This is really the transmittal up to the state level for the comp plan change to the text. But this is just to show you, before we were in here with the 4-story building, and we were about 110,000 square feet. Now we are at about 100,000 square feet and at a 3-story building. So we heard you loud and clear. We know that was an issue on the 4 stories. And what we did to, and you're going to say, well, how did you get that number to still kind of work for you guys? Because 4 stories was kind of required. So what we did is we basically elongated the building a bit. What we really wanted to do was preserve the green space that we created. The previous building was about 600 feet in length. So the green space that you see to the right of the page, that green space was not in existence on the previous approval. So we wanted to create as much green space as we could. We want to be able to do that community sign for Bryn Mawr there and kind of create a sense of community as you're entering the development. So that was the goal there, and we were still able to preserve enough square footage to make the numbers work. Going to the next slide, this is previous approval. So the previous approval was what this board, well, maybe not every member, but this board had approved as a preliminary approval. And so as you can see, I won't run through every number, but roughly, 100,000 and change square feet, 1.24 FAR, which we're at 1.28 FAR. The reason you're seeing a change there is because our FAR went up by that 400ths because we had to dedicate the land to Meritage. So that dedication made our property a little bit smaller, which bumps up our FAR. So again, basically the exact same numbers as you're seeing prior. They had a 3-story building. We're proposing a 3-story building. We're within about 1.5 feet or so of building height from the previous building that was approved. And our building coverage, again, is up 2% because, again, the dedication of property. But what we are doing to make the project feasible is we're adding in a secondary driveway closer to South Place. That secondary driveway allows for a second access point to the project and really makes this work. Otherwise, you couldn't have someone walking 600 feet down a corridor, to store their belongings. Go on to some of the site render. Again, these are just to show you what this building would look like at the 3 stories. So we did modify that. We heard you loud and clear. And again, this will be coming back with the site plan application. So the second rendering, and then a bird's eye view. And that's all I have for you today. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and look forward to your recommendation.
Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate it. So what we're going to do, we'll start here. Can you have something to sort of reference?
Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, and Josh will forgive me, just to be on record, the previous project did receive preliminary approval. However, once they went into, they being Mr. Beebe, once he went into an agreement with Heritage, that plan was going to have to come back to council for preliminary. He was going to have to amend that plan. So it didn't get final approval, and it was going to have to come back for preliminary, just to be on record.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may add, I meant to mention it in the presentation, but the previous preliminary approval should have gone through the same request that we're before you tonight, because they were at the 1.2 FAR. Well, the comp plan only allows 0.5. So they should have come through the same exact request that we're here for tonight. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Okay, so noted. Okay, anything else before we go to council, Ken? Okay. Right, with that being said, if you could just hold still, well, I'm sure there may be some questions for you or for a representative of whomever is appropriate. So at this point in time, are there any council comments or questions as it relates to the proposal?
Yes. Thank you and good evening for your presentation. Can you elaborate a bit on the, you said Meritage and the conversation with you in agreement, but I'm looking at the location. You may have to back up in your presentation. It's a location where All Nations held a dealership. That's where you're proposing, if we get past that, the construction of this facility, can you kind of give me some clarity on that, what you're doing between you and there, if you can?
So that's a good question, and that's already been in an agreement, based on the previous owner of the property, so that property is gone. It's been dedicated,
Okay.
and that's gone at this point. So Meritage is in the agreement, they're on the hook to actually construct those improvements that you see in between, which is called West Place. So they're to be, and some of that work's already underway, but they're on the hook to do that as part of the agreement. So that agreement's done, signed, and in the works right now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I'll give you some color. Ben McFarland.
I'm sorry, if you would, just state your name and address.
Yeah, Benjamin McFarland.
Okay.
CEO of Storefront America, founder. Basically, when we acquired the asset, Meritage had already worked out that their driveway was going to be too close to the dealership, and so they needed the adjacent property owner to dedicate some land over so they could get a connection into that West Place Road. And so that deal was just already part of the process, and we were just working with them so they can store equipment and various things on the property at no charge, just to allow them to complete their project and get their road built. So we're just working with them the best we can before we're able to work out something here.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions from council? McConnell? We'll go to McConnell, and then we'll come back to Vice Mayor, then Councilman. This is a tag on to a question? Okay, we'll go to Councilman Smith, and then we'll come back.
No, go ahead, Vice Mayor, and then I come behind you.
Okay.
And then I'll come behind
No,
you.
well, if you had a companion
No,
question?
that's
Okay,
different, so
okay.
I'll allow her to go ahead.
Okay, oh, not a problem. We'll go to McConnell, then Vice Mayor, then Councilman Smith.
Can you elaborate on you mentioned the entrance from South Place? Can you?
So it's not actually an entrance off of South Place, it's most near to South Place. So there's still about 140-foot separation between South Place and our driveway. So, but we need the dual access points because of the length of the building.
Okay, anything else? Okay, Vice Mayor?
I was trying to understand your diagram in relationship to the agreed usage of property on the corner of West Place. I guess this diagram gives more detail as to how the road will be designed, yes, because I'm not seeing that on this.
Correct, it's just a pretty picture, that's not the real engineered drawing. Correct. But yeah, if you look at slide 10, the color site plan, that has the designed features of that. So you'll see the peanut that kind of separates the driveways, and you'll see how that access kind of sweeps into the site. Yeah.
Excellent.
So this portion, previously the property came straight down, and so this sliver here is what was dedicated to create West Place.
So the portion of that is a shared driveway when you live in there, that's the road.
That's correct. There's a cross-access agreement in place, yes.
The other concern I was having is they make reference to the two entrances, east and west, are probably identified with the curb and the north and south, it's hard to say. But the two entrances, I guess, which end is the actual office where people would register and secure their
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to put it on the west side, closer to the dealership, just gives people more time to get into that driveway, and I think it'd be easier to get out of there. I think it'd be best on the west side, or closest to the car dealership for the office. I think it'd probably be the best place for it.
Okay. So what would be the route for them to travel if they purchase storage on the east end of the building? How would they go from the office to the store?
Well, they're gonna have to leave that office and come back around and go up a light or two or whatever they need to do.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
always.
That would just be for the first time. Then they would know to go into the west, the eastern access.
I guess I was just trying to identify this, I guess it's like a back alley line on the property, between the property line.
That's just the property line. I mean, we're gonna put vegetation all along the back there.
Oh, okay.
It immediately abuts the other parcels.
Okay.
There's no hiatus or anything back there.
No type of roadway there at all. Okay, that's the most exciting. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, Councilman Smith?
Okay, I do have, two questions. And I thought, when you spoke earlier in the presentation about, Beltway, definitely how much dedication work, because I think that's key if, I'm understanding that, greenery and that Beltway, and you talk about the landscape and that. And what's why I'm asking that, I'm trying to see how you can balance that greenery and make a building that's going to serve your client, whoever decides to use that building. So kind of explain that. And the last, second question would be retention wall. There's going to be a retention wall on the inside of this development if we go forward.
So I believe, and let me go to the map real quick here.
Please.
This is, talking about this area.
Yes, you talk about green, right.
So this area didn't exist on the previous approval.
Right.
So what we wanted to do was create some green space. So that green space will consist of some dry detention area and also some greenery. So we'll be able to put trees in there. And also we wanted to put the entry sign for Bryn Mawr right at that corner.
Okay.
So really, it's just going to be for landscape and for some drainage that we have to have on the site.
Okay. Talk about the wall.
We haven't proposed any walls at this point. Let me just take a look at them. There's an existing chain link fence that runs along the back of the property, and that's actually what appears, it appears to be off-site, so that's in the neighbor's backyard, so that fence that's currently there. So we're not proposing to put any structures back there. There's a lot of utilities that run along the backside of the proposed building. So we have landscape in there, and then there's some overhead utility lines and things like that. So we really would be hard pressed to put any kind of retaining wall or anything because the utility companies would object to it.
Okay, so,
And just if I may clarify, although the conversation is going towards site plan level details, just remember that's coming at a later step depending on what the LPA does tonight and what the council does tonight. Tonight before you is strictly the comprehensive plan text amendment. So just be mindful that those kind of more detailed discussions can happen at site plan. But you're certainly, if the LPA were to make a recommendation of approval tonight, you're not approving landscaping tonight, you're not approving fencing, walls, any of that tonight. It's strictly the comprehensive text amendment that is before you tonight. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
One of the things that might be helpful with this property, the way it is now, it's probably pretty loud in that neighborhood with all the traffic. With the amount of landscaping buffering we're going to do in the building, it's going to become very quiet back there because it's going to shelter so much sound from that neighborhood. And we have a pretty high security standard, and so we'll have probably over 50 cameras on the property between inside and outside of that. So we want to cover every hallway and exterior, so there's no blind spots. So we work quite a bit nationwide. We're in 20 states, and we work quite a bit with the sheriffs and police departments throughout the U.S. In catching, criminal no activity. And so, you know, it's going to make this a really safe area, and I think you'll be amazed by the sound reduction that we're going to get from the amount of landscaping and the fact that the building's going to be there. And again, storage is super low use. Our biggest traffic day in self-storage is on a Saturday when no one else is out on the road for, you know, going to the office. And so, you know, maybe we get 4 visitors a day on Saturday at most, and maybe one a day during the week. We're happy if we get 1 rental a day. So it just gives you a little bit more color on that.
Righty, Councilwoman Green?
Thank you. You can't see my smile behind my mask. Because I'm smiling, I want to say thanks for teaching me how to pronounce. I've been saying meritage. It's meritage. Thank you. That's the one. I have a few questions, that's it. Did you say there are 2 entrances?
Yes, two driveways into the facility, correct. I can point them out. This is the shared access with Meritage. And this is the secondary access point here. This is southwest.
This may be a crazy question, but who is your major, I guess, a customer? So, Schoolie Cadillac, how far are you from Schoolie? Pardon?
It's right next door on the map.
It's called Automation? Oh, I still call it Auto, okay.
Here to the bathroom. Here to the bathroom.
Wait, 2 people talking to me. I'd listen to my mayor first.
From building to building is probably 200 feet. From the separation of buildings, probably 200 feet. The driveways, probably somewhere between 50 and 75 feet. It was all approved by the Palm Beach County as well for that driveway separation. So the Palm Beach County was heavily involved in that process as well of how that driveway would be set up.
I didn't know there were 2 driveways. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't. Just all that today.
For context, it would probably be from where you're sitting to your car, that distance. Okay, anything else? Okay. Alrighty, just any other council comments or questions? Just a couple questions. Now, what I do want to do, because I'm sure that there are going to be some questions or comments perhaps from the public, and so we want to sort of set the stage for that. So what I'd like to do is ask a question here. And it's a rhetorical question for me. And just for the record, I have met with the applicants, and we've had several meetings prior to the presentation that they gave, and I think I did state that prior. So there's some information that I've already received, and so I won't go over that again. Now, as it relates to just the amendment itself, just for the record, the amendment, and this goes to committee, the amendment, if approved, is tied to the applicant, or once if approved, then it's tied to the land or to the applicant.
Well, no, the comp plan, should the LPA make a recommendation of approval tonight, should the council approve what's before you in this comprehensive text amendment, this would approve, it would modify or amend your comprehensive plan to increase the floor area ratio for commercial land use parcels in town to allow for that 1.5 FAR. However, those parcels that it would apply to that would be allowed to make use of that increased FAR also have to be at least 1.3 acres in size, and they have to have direct frontage on Australian or 45th Street.
Okay.
So should you make this change to your comp plan, any self-storage use that meets those criteria would be allowed to, in a commercially land-used parcel, make use of that additional floor area ratio.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted it on the record. Now, the other question, again, rhetorical. Now, does the current zoning allow for the construction of a self-storage facility?
This is commercial limited, yes.
Okay, so noted. Alrighty, so those were the 2 questions I had. I just wanted to make sure that we get that on the record for understanding purposes. And understanding that attorney was appropriate when she stated that we'll have additional questions as, if approved, going forward in terms of the site plan. So what I'll do to get around that, I'll just speak to information shared by the applicant. How's that? Okay. All righty. Specifically, when you talked about the two driveways itself, I was sitting and I was thinking in terms of just the adjacent driveway that would be going into the Meritage project. I know that they're sort of close together, and I guess in my mind, I started thinking about the traffic going into Meritage. And while this is a low traffic kind of a project, there's going to be parking on both sides, on both the west proposed parking on both the west and the east side of the building? Okay. Okay.
Those trips that you're talking about coming in, there's two per hour in a peak. So we're talking about, one turn every half hour in the peak hour of the day.
Okay. Now, during one of the meetings that we had, or I think it was also discussed here at council, because I know a few residents got excited about, and I think the response to, as we were talking about the wall, one resident sort of almost jumped up and said, you can make it 50 feet. So there was conversation regarding a wall. There has not been conversation as you've gone forward about a potential barrier wall between the project and the residents.
So, as we mentioned, the difficulty there is the number of utilities that exist in the rear. So we would have to get a number of releases from various utilities, including FPL.
Excuse me, sir, could you get closer to your mic?
Absolutely. There's a 5-foot utility easement that runs along that rear overhead lines. So there's a number, and that overhead line is not consistent along that perimeter either. So there's a lot of obstruction there, challenges to getting a wall within that rear, along that property line.
Okay. What is the proposed setback on the frontage?
On the front?
On the front portion of the proposed project?
We are at 10-foot front setback.
10 foot? 10
And
feet?
again, that's at the nearest points. It kind of the shape of the property, it bows in to create a larger setback for the middle.
Okay, and what's the green belt, proposed green belt on the backside from the utility easement?
17-foot rear setback. At again, at its closest, and then it tapers off.
Right. Now, and of course, there was a mention of the security cameras and all of that. Are there any entry doors or windows or anything that would be on the backside of the proposed project?
No, there would be no entries or windows on that rear.
Okay, that's what I had for tonight. Any other comments from committee?
Just one additional clarification on what I told you about your zoning. I just wanted to verify, and I checked your code. The self-storage facility small is a special exception use in CL. That's how you've seen that in the past, as you recall, a little over 2 years ago now. That's when that ordinance modified your zoning code, but that is a special exception use approval. So as we said, there would be site planning, there would be potentially variances, certainly special exception approval would come back, depending on the outcome of this comp plan text amendment.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. We appreciate it. All righty. So what we'll do is we'll go to administration. So if there's anything you have before we go to the floor. Okay. No other questions or comments from council at this point? Okay.
Just one additional thing, just to call to your attention, you also have in your backup for your LPA tonight, you have the 2 ordinances. You have 2 public hearings on your agenda, so I just wanted to call to your attention that you have ordinances 2021-03, which is the item before you now. That is also included in your backup. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Okay.
That's all, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. Hearing that there's no comments, additional comments or questions from council or staff, we'll now open the floor to public comment. If there's any comment from the public, we'll entertain it at this point. So if there's anyone physically here of the public who would like to speak to this item, we'd excuse me, I'm sorry. We'd ask that you just come to the podium, just state your name and address for the record. Okay. Yes, just to the podium. Okay, just a little closer to the, feel free to take it off if you like. And, okay, okay. Okay.
You mentioned 25th in Australia, so that's the only question I have. We're on Australian Avenue.
Okay, 45th and Australian. Oh, I'm sorry, that was reference to a similar project?
Maybe what she's asking, in the report, it indicated that this agreement is for both uses of either or 45th or Australian Avenue. She know if this means this is going to affect Australian Avenue in the project, and she's trying to understand.
Oh, understood. Yeah, I can understand what you're saying. So, correct. So this particular project will have no bearing on any projects on Australia. The code or the comp plan text amendment that's looking to be changed, it impacts the entire town, right? So what we're saying is properties that are located on Australia that have nothing to do with our project could apply for a similar request. But our specific project does not have any bearing on any projects on Australia.
Okay, well, thanks, we appreciate it. Other comments from the public?
Yeah, one question. Tom Kelly, 1717 Warburton Avenue. You said on the back side of the building you have 17-foot easement, because FPL has some transformers on that line that they can have access to. Correct. So there's plenty of room there.
Are you talking to Mike?
Did you need to?
Okay. I'm sorry. All right. So what we'll do is, if you just restate his question. Okay.
So what Mr. Kelly was saying is that there's some large transmission lines with transformers on those lines that run along the rear of the building, of the proposed building. So he just said he wanted to make sure that we accommodated for that in our plans.
Okay.
So, and absolutely, we accommodate for the trees and for the building to be able to accommodate, within the parameters that we have to work with.
Thanks so much. And let me just confirm that was your question? Okay, great. Okay. Roddy, any other questions or comments from the public? Okay. And what we'll do, if we have anyone participating online, on our face home, okay, no one there. Okay, let's just make sure that there's no other comment from the public. Okay, hearing none, we'll close the floor to public comment, and we'll come back now to the dais. Is there any other comments or questions from council? Okay, we'll go to administration. Anything to add to this? Again, from administration? Amity, anything from legal?
No, sir. The only thing, just a reminder that you are sitting tonight currently in the LPA capacity and the local planning agency capacity. So the motion should be in the form of a recommendation to the town council. The maker of any motion could reference the ordinance number for each of the public hearings before you. So, for example, if there was a recommendation to recommend approval, it could be of ordinance 2021-03. Similarly, with the same item, the next public hearing as well. That's all, sir.
Thank you so much. Okay, and that as well, I'm sure that we're all clear on it, that if indeed we vote in the affirmative that this is approved, it's about the land only to allow for the construction, not what you're currently seeing. Okay, an approval would be to allow the building of a facility, as stated, on the land, and not what you're seeing. So it's still, there are other processes that would take place to sort of govern what would be built and how. So, Amity?
And if I could just clarify that, the approval tonight or recommendation of approval tonight would strictly be to approve the amendment to the comprehensive plan, as was shown, that note on the bottom, which would increase the floor area ratio, note 1, for self-storage facilities only to that 1.5, so long as they are at least 1.3 acres in size and fronting on 45th Street or Australian. So before you tonight, the item is strictly approval or denial of that comprehensive the comprehensive plan amendment. You're not approving the project, you're not approving the building, you're strictly approving the requested revision to the comprehensive plan amendment, future land use element. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, certainly, thanks so much. So at this point in time, if there's no other questions or comments, and as stated by our attorney, what we have before us is ordinance number 2021-03 and ordinance number 2021-04. The make of the motion, if you would just reference, I'd like to approve or deny, whatever your pleasure is, ordinance number 2 as read, as identified on your agenda. So at this point in time, if there's no other questions or comments. Okay, hearing none, motion please.
Mr. Mayor, I so move that we approve comp plan ordinance. Is that the correct way to define it?
This item is ordinance 2021-03 for the comp plan text amendment, SR 2021-01.
Text change ordinance number 2021-03. And this would be a separate from the second ordinance.
That's correct. This is just 03 before you now.
That's my motion that we approve.
Okay, thanks so much. A motion has been made to approve ordinance number 2021-03, amending the town's comprehensive development plan as identified in the documents before us. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. Are there any questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
No.
Yes.
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 Yes. But our next order of business, of course, is ordinance number 2021-04.
Hi, good evening again. For the record, Denise Malone, the Energy Consultant. The item before you is a new element to the comprehensive plan known as the private property rights element. This is a requirement that was enacted by the legislature this summer with House Bill 59. And in that legislation, it calls for certain rights to be considered in local decision-making. So this element has been prepared. It essentially reiterates everything that's in that House bill. It meets the state statute requirement, and we're asking for you to transmit this to the state so that it ultimately does become part of your comprehensive plan.
Okay, committee?
Thank you, sir. And if I could just add on to that, as Denise indicated, this is a requirement of the last legislative session. The trigger for your requirement to consider this tonight is the previous item. So what the law now says is that on your first comprehensive text amendment or on your next EAR, which is your evaluation and appraisal report, you have to include and develop and include this private property rights element. So because of the previous item, the timing of the previous item, the law went into effect July of this year, you're required to now implement this. This is not something we can avoid. It is required. It is a part of the law now. As Denise indicated, and as you can see before you, she came up with and created and developed a very streamlined private property rights element. It very closely tracks the statutes. It's in conformance with the law, but it is a requirement. So with that, I'll answer any additional questions you have.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it. My apologies. At this point in time, if there is any questions from council, any questions or comments? McConnell?
Just a comment. This 21-04 is actually mandated by the state. Am I right or wrong?
It is mandated by Florida law. Yes, sir.
Yes. And in fact, we had a House representative that came before us at the last meeting and sort of shared what took place in the House bill as well.
And they actually tried, if I may, Mr. Mayor, they tried last session, so a year ago they tried, and it got, I think it got vetoed is my recollection. It came back again this last session and it went through. So it is now, as he said, a requirement of state law.
Okay. Great. Other comments or questions from council?
So, Ms. Davidson never lecture, as we know now is law. What what is the private property owner seeking? Can you kind of clarify that, just give me clear my mind and council mind what that is?
So it's not, thank you, sir, it's not that the actual private property owners are seeking anything, and it doesn't require you to do anything other than to put these goals, objectives, and policies into your comprehensive plan, which say that you will, as the local government, in all of your decision-making, you will consider these policies, these private property rights that are specified in the law, you'll consider them in your decision-making. And I would argue strongly that you were already doing that. This has just been required now to be put into your comprehensive plan, and it's become now part of your decision-making process. It's your, as you know, your comprehensive plan is your umbrella, your overarching big picture. How do you want your town to be developed? Now you are going to be having an element that says, in all decision-making from comp plan down, you need to consider these private property rights as part of that decision-making process. So it doesn't impact your land development regulations, your zoning code, just big picture policy statements in your comp plan.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
I think I have a clear understanding, but I just wanted to ask, this ordinance now, does it provide certain protections for private property owners, or is it protection for the town,
It doesn't, I'll say it requires in that decision-making process. So if you get a development application, if you get any number of rezoning, comp plan change, any kind of development request before the town, that you consider these things in the town's decision-making process. So in whatever capacity you're reviewing various development applications, so either as the LPA or as the council, that you will consider these policies when you're making your decisions. It doesn't require anything other than that you consider these as part of your decision-making processes.
Councilman Smith?
So if I'm hearing you right, it's just basically inclusion, not exclusion.
Correct.
Ready? Just before we go to administration, anything else from council? Any other questions or comments? Okay, Ken?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to reiterate what Nettie said prior, that you've already been doing this. This is something the town's been doing for years. Certainly do consider the rights of property owners. This is just something the state has decided to impose upon you.
Yeah, thank you. Said the right word.
You were already doing this. Just want anyone to think that we have not been doing it. You have been.
Oh, certainly. Oh, always have. Okay.
so basically it's just putting our previous actions now in black and white.
And just codifying it. We've been doing anyway.
So that is a protection.
Yeah, we've always protected our residents. Oh, certainly. Okay. If there's nothing else, now, we don't want to be absent of any input or comment that our planner is here as well. Okay. Oh, great. Alrighty. Hearing that there's no other comments or questions, I will open the floor to public comment. If there's any public comment. Okay, thank you so much. Seeing that there's no public comment, we'll close the floor to public comment, come back to the dais. So at this point in time, if we've had full discussion, if there are no other questions or comments, motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, the motion that we adopt ordinance number 2021-04 to an amendment to a comprehensive development plan that adopt to private property.
Thank you so much. Motion has been made.
Just for clarification, this would be, because you're serving in the capacity of the local planning agency, it would be a recommendation to
To-
council.
Okay, I'll repeat then. Sorry about that. Your recommendation to ordinance 2021-04 to adopt amendment of a comprehensive development plan for private property rights.
Okay. So is your motion, Councilman Smith, a motion to approve a forwarding of this to be considered by the town council?
I am motioning to approve.
Okay, so moved. Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Has been properly moved and seconded. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
No.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you so much, and of course, we'll take this up at the council meeting. Seeing that that is the only business for our LPA, is there a motion for adjournment?
So move for adjournment to the LPA.
That motion has been made, is there a second?
Second.
Has been properly moved and second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, it is carried. Thanks so much, we're going to have you just hold by for another minute or two, and we'll get right into the last session. Is that it? Oh, three things, I'm sorry, make sure I get the right one. Oh, doing fine. How are you doing? Oh, everything's going great. No complaints.
No complaints.
Yeah, won't get better.
I like your man. This is actually fan embroidery.
Okay.
I'm originally from Paraguay, South America.
Oh, okay.
A friend of mine brought me from.
Okay.
It's so feminine.
Oh, that person is from Paraguay?
Excuse me?
The person is from Paraguay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
This is a very traditional embroidery.
Oh.
The ladies in Paraguay just work on that.
Oh, wow. It's nice.
I met her. She told me the same, the same style. I can't remember where I was when I met her. And she told me the same thing you said. I said, that's what it is. Too bad